Sonia Carmen Stone was a 30-year-old single mother living with her 4-year-old daughter in Monterey County, California in 1981. She was a merchandiser and sales representative for Levi Strauss & Company. On October 15, 1981, a friend of Sonia, Colleen McBride, knocked on her front door. When Sonia didn't answer, McBride made her way inside. It was then that she found Sonia's partially clothed body sprawled on the floor of her living room. She had been strangled with a pair of pantyhose. Several pieces of DNA evidence were collected from the crime scene to be used later. Investigators decided to make a timeline of the crime. They believed her life was taken while her young daughter was at school. It was around noon when her body was found. Soon after the crime took place, a man told investigators that he has a friend who admitted to being inside Sonia's house the morning her life was taken. The friend is Michael Glazebrook, Sonia's neighbor. A day after the crime occurred, investigators decided to interview Michael. They saw that he had a scratch on his face and was extremely nervous. On December 18, 1981, he was arrested in connection to the case. In 1983, he was tried, but the jury could not agree on his innocence or guilt. Prosecutors dropped the case following a mistrial. In the early 1980s, DNA evidence was a long way off. Blood was found under Sonia's fingernails, but lab technicians could only tell that it did not belong to her. In 2020, investigators decided to re-examine the case. They tested the DNA evidence they had collected back in 1981 again. They were then able to create a DNA profile. Because they still believed Michael Glazebrook was involved, they collected his DNA sample. After some more testing, it was confirmed that Michael is responsible for taking the life of Sonia. 65-year-old Michael was arrested at his home in Seaside, California in August of 2021. He worked as a school bus driver, which is just terrifying. Michael now finds himself in the Monterey County Jail, where he is being held in lieu of bail, set at $1 million. 25-year-old Kathy Warnett Hicks lived in Atlanta, Georgia in 1982. She was an employee for Delta Airlines. In September, Kathy was visiting Hawaii to participate in a company softball tournament. She was staying at the Iwikai Hotel. Kathy was last seen by her co-workers on September 19th at 1:30 a.m. She was seen with a man named Tommy. According to the co-workers, Kathy and Tommy rode an elevator from the 24th floor to the hotel lobby. The pair then went toward the pool area, while her friends went to a nearby club. A little later in the day, at 10 a.m., two joggers found a woman's body when they stopped by the water reserve not far from the hotel. She was quickly identified as Kathy Hicks. She had been strangled. Investigators from the Honolulu Police Department started investigating the case. DNA was found on Kathy's underwear that belonged to a male. The DNA was stored so it could be used later when DNA was more advanced. A sketch was made of the man witnesses saw Kathy with last. A co-worker of Kathy also told investigators that the man said he was a Navy sailor and had been in Hawaii for about 2 years, and that he was a native of Tuskegee, Alabama, and lived in Jacksonville, Florida before moving to Hawaii. No witnesses to the crime came forward, and police did not find any other useful leads, so the case went cold. Then, in 2019, the solving of an entirely different cold case would lead to the suspect in Kathy's case. Investigators tested DNA found at the crime scene of Pamela Cahanes and found that 61-year-old Thomas Lewis Garner is responsible for taking her life. Thereafter, in 2021, they found that his DNA also matched the DNA found on Kathy Hicks's underwear. Thomas worked as a dental hygienist in Jacksonville, Florida. He was also a veteran. In June of 2021, he was given a life sentence for what he did to Pamela, and investigators are sure he'll soon be convicted for taking Kathy's life. Attorney Megan Cowell said that it is vital that he should be prosecuted even though he was already sentenced to life in prison. It's justice for the victim and the victim's family. Bringing a prosecution on behalf of the victim's family often makes you feel like justice has prevailed. Let's say, for example, the Florida Supreme Court overrules the conviction for some reason and dismisses the case. Now, if the government doesn't bring the case against the same suspect, the suspect will be let out into the community and could and probably would reoffend. DNA is extremely helpful because we can rely on the science. So now we can identify the perpetrator, we can prosecute the perpetrator, and hopefully convict the perpetrator. I'm sure many of you also now want to hear more about the Pamela Caines case, so here it is in a nutshell. Pamela grew up in Stillwater, Minnesota. In 1984, 25-year-old Pamela enlisted in the Navy. In May of that year, she left behind her family and flew across the country to Orlando, Florida, to begin training at the Orlando Naval Training Center. Sadly, Pamela never had the chance to see her dreams come true. 2 days after her graduation in August 1984, her lifeless body was discovered in front of a vacant home in Sanford, Florida. She had been assaulted and strangled. Investigators were able to collect DNA belonging to an unknown man from her body. In 2000 and 2005, investigators unsuccessfully attempted to find a DNA match to Pamela's attacker. In 2015, investigators finally got a break. DNA from Pamela's clothing was submitted to a private forensic genealogy service. Investigators were able to access DNA profiles of individuals who submitted their DNA to genealogy websites. They found a match to a distant relative of Pamela's attacker. Investigators began to build a family tree that would eventually lead them to Thomas Garner, as we already know. Investigators had to make sure they had the right guy, so they then collected a cigarette that he had smoked. The samples matched the DNA found on skin collected from underneath Pamela's fingernails. Her surviving family members were very happy to hear the great news when investigators told them that he was arrested and also when he was convicted.